Welcome to Somali Nexus, where voices from the Horn of Africa come alive, weaving together stories of heritage, resilience, and faith. Today, we journey to the edge of the Gulf of Aden, to a place once known as the City of Gateways, Zeila. Long before the world's maps were drawn, Zeila stood as a luminous port of power and connection. The winds that sweep across its coral shores once carried the scent of myrrh and the hum of distant markets. Caravans from the African interior brought gold, ivory, and frankincense to its gates, while ships from Arabia, Persia, and India carried fabrics, spices, and stories from across the seas. But Zeila was more than a city of trade. It was a city of faith. Here, Islam first stepped onto the soil of the Horn of Africa. It's said that some of the Prophet Muhammad's companions, fleeing persecution in Mecca, found their first welcome along these shores during the First Hijra. Their arrival transformed Zeila into Islam's first threshold in Africa, a place where refuge became revelation. And standing as a silent witness to that sacred moment is one of the continent's oldest mosques, the Masjid al-Kiblatain, the Mosque of the Two Qiblas. Built in the early 7th century, its two prayer niches still mark a turning point in Islamic history, one facing Jerusalem, the first direction of prayer, and the other toward Mecca, the eternal home of Islam. Though time and tide have worn its stones, the mosque endures as a living testament, a beacon of continuity, faith, and the enduring spirit of Zeila. For centuries, Zeila thrived as the beating heart of powerful sultanates, Ifat and Adal, linking Africa to Arabia, and Harar to the wider Indian Ocean world. Its markets sang with many tongues, its scholars illuminated minds from Cairo to Damascus, and its harbor pulsed with the rhythm of global trade. Today, Zeila's ruins still whisper of glory, devotion, and resilience. Join us as we uncover the story of Zeila, Islam's first threshold in the Horn of Africa, a city that once connected worlds and continues to echo through time. Follow, share, and subscribe to Somali Nexus, where every episode reopens the gateways of our shared past and brings the spirit of our history to life.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to explore a forgotten city, Zeila, an ancient port on the Gulf of Aden. Its geography really was its destiny, both its making and its downfall. If you were to visit Zeila today, well, the ruins are quite stark. You see crumbling stone, mostly Ottoman era, maybe the ghostly outlines of old walls. It feels a bit like a historical footnote, doesn't it?
It really does, but those fragments, they don't tell the whole story, not even close.
Exactly for what? Over 1,000 years, Zeila was this vibrant metropolis. It was the crucial pivot point where everything flowed, goods, gold, people, certainly ideas and faith, moving between the African interior and that vast Indian Ocean world. We're talking Arabia, Persia, India.
It was, you could say, the gate Zeila had this dual role as the classic city of gateways, connecting all these different trade networks, and significantly, it was also Islam's earliest door into the Horn of Africa.
Yeah.
So the story we're tracing today follows this really dramatic arc from its beginnings as the classical port of Avalites, then rising to become the capital of the Islamic sultanates Ifat and Adal, and then, well, the long decline.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, because you've identified the central tension, and it seems it's all down to geography, isn't it?
Entirely. Its location made it the perfect hub for incredibly valuable trade. The bold ivory, myrrh, frankincense, very high demand stuff.
Huge value.
But that exact same spot put it right on a permanent fault line. It was squeezed between two really competing worlds, the Islamic trading coast and the ancient Christian empire of Abyssinia up in the highlands.
So that role being this contestant gateway, it drove both the good times and the bad.
It defined both its prosperity and ultimately the centuries of conflict.
So before we jump into the Islamic period, you're saying its role as a trade hub was actually much older?
Oh, absolutely. To really get the Islamic era, you have to understand that Zeila's function as a commercial gateway was ancient. Islam didn't create this channel.
It just used it.
It flowed through it, utilized it, and, yeah, definitely transformed it. But the pipeline itself, millennia old.
Wow. How far back are we talking? Is there solid proof of it being a big deal before, say, the 7th century?
The evidence is remarkably good, actually. The scholarly consensus links Zeila directly to a port called Avalites,
Avalites, right?
which is mentioned quite clearly in the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea.
Ah, the Periplus. For anyone listening who doesn't know, that's basically a sailor's guide from the 1st century CE, right? Greco-Roman.
Exactly. A mariner's guide to the Red Sea and Indian Ocean trade roads. And it specifically names Avalites as a key market, spices, myrrh, ivory again.
Okay.
But here's the really crucial part. This wasn't just about foreign ships docking. The trade relied on a very sophisticated indigenous infrastructure. Avalites wasn't just plonked down on an empty coast. It was built on top of this pre-existing network, a hinterland trade system connecting inland communities, pastoralist towns like Abasa and Amud to the sea. And that network had been working for maybe 4,000 years.
4,000 years. Incredible. So, the local people must have been skilled seafarers themselves. It wasn't just Romans or Arabs sailing in.
That's a key point. The sources confirm advanced local maritime skills. They talk about the Baden.
The beaten.
Yeah, it's this ancient Somali sewn boat, a unique kind of boat construction. It shows they weren't just passive recipients of trade, they were active participants, facilitators.
So Zeila, or Avalites then, was already linking the Near East, Rome, Persia with places like India using local expertise.
Precisely. It confirms its role as a true nexus, not just some stopping point.
And did the Periplus say anything about, like, the politics of the area back then?
It gives us a little glimpse. It described the governance as pretty decentralized, lots of autonomous city-states, and it noted the locals, who they called the Barbaroi, were, quote, very unruly.
Unruly.
Fiercely independent. And you know, that spirit of autonomy, maybe even resistance to central control, that really echoes later in the character of the Ifat and Adal sultanates.
That makes a lot of sense. An independent streak rooted in ancient commercial power. Okay, let's shift gears then to the period that really cements Zeila's place in history, this identity as Islam's first threshold. And what's so striking, as you said, is that it starts with refuge, with sanctuary, not with war, which feels like a paradox given what came later.
It is a powerful contrast. We're talking about the First Hijra. This is around 613, maybe 615 CE, right?
Very early Islam.
Extremely early. The very first Muslims were facing intense persecution in Mecca, and the Prophet Muhammad advised them, including his own daughter Ruqayyah, to seek safety across the sea.
With the Christian king of Abyssinia, the Negus, who is known for being just.
Exactly. A really critical moment of interfaith refuge, actually.
And the strong local tradition, particularly around Zeila, insists that these companions, the Sahaba, they stopped in Zeila first.
Yes, that tradition holds they established an initial community right there in Zeila before heading inland to the Negus's court.
Which would make Zeila literally the first place Islam touched down on the African continent.
That's the tradition, and it gives the city this profound historical and spiritual significance. And incredibly, there's physical evidence that backs up this remarkably early date.
You're talking about the mosque?
The Masjid al-Kiblatain, the Mosque of the two Qiblas.
Now, when you hear Old Mosque in Africa, you might think, I don't know, 14th century, maybe 12. But this one?
This one is archaeologically dated to the 7th century.
7th century, wow.
Making it one of the absolute oldest mosques anywhere in Africa. And the name itself, Two Qiblas, tells the story.
Explain that. What does the two Qiblas, the two prayer directions, signify?
So, the Qibla is the direction Muslims face when they pray. Very early on, after the Hijra to Medina, in 622 CE, Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem. Then about 2 years later, in 624 CE, the divine instruction came to change the Qibla towards the Kaaba in Mecca.
I see.
Zeila Mosque has two mihrabs. Those are the prayer niches indicating the direction. One faces northwest towards Jerusalem, the other faces north towards Mecca.
So it physically captures that exact moment of change.
Precisely. It's incredibly rare architectural evidence found almost nowhere else. It dates the Muslim community in Zeila not just generally to the 7th century, but specifically to that transitional phase right at the very beginning of Islam as an established religion. It shows Zeila was immediately plugged into the core events of the early Islamic world.
That's absolutely fascinating. And this community, initially refugees, it didn't stay small for long.
No, it consolidated quite rapidly.
Yeah.
By the late 9th century, Zeila wasn't just a haven. It had become the capital, essentially, of an organized Islamic state, the Adal Kingdom.
And for the next, 600 years, it remained central.
Absolutely. For 6 centuries, Zeila was the political, the commercial, and the military heart of Muslim power in the region. As the capital of the successive sultanates of Ifat and then Adal,
its influence was huge then.
So immense that external sources, writers in Cairo or Damascus, they often didn't even bother differentiating the inland regions. They just called the whole Sultanate of Ifat the country of Zeila.
Wow. Okay, so this brings us squarely to the conflict. If Zeila is the heart, what's the main artery? What drove the constant wars with Christian Abyssinia, the Solomonic dynasty?
Fundamentally, it was about the economy, specifically control over the Zeila-Harar caravan route.
Ah, the trade route again.
Always the trade route. This was the funnel, always all the valuable goods from the interior, the gold, the ivory slaves, to float out through Harar, down to Zeila, and then out to the wider world.
And controlling that meant controlling the money.
Exactly. Control of the route, control of the customs revenue, that was the engine powering the sultanates. And it was the main point of friction with the Christian emperors, especially someone like Amda-Seyon I, who was very expansionist. They were constantly fighting over control of those custom posts.
This long struggle, centuries long, it eventually peaks, doesn't it? In the 16th century with Imam Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi.
Yeah, better known as Ahmad Guri or Gran, the left-handed.
Right? And Zeila's role becomes critical for his campaigns.
Indispensable. It was the logistical hub for his absolutely devastating invasion of Abyssinia.
And what's really interesting here, you mentioned, is this wasn't just a local fight anymore. Zeila becomes a channel for bigger global rivalries.
That's the key shift. Imam Ahmad's stunning initial success, the speed and scale of his conquest, was largely down to a massive technological advantage, something new in the highlands.
Which was?
Firearms, cannons, and importantly, arquebusier. Early muskets.
Gunpowder technology.
Pioneering technology for that region at that time. And where did it come from? It was supplied by the Ottoman Empire.
Okay, so Adal's powerful ally. Why were the Ottomans involved?
Well, they were increasingly competing with the Portuguese for control of the Red Sea and Indian Ocean trade routes, supporting Adal against Christian Ethiopia, which was seen as a potential Portuguese ally, served their strategic interest.
So the guns, the ammo, even the experts.
Exactly. The gunpowder, the cannons, even specialized Turkish arquebusier soldiers skilled in using these new weapons. It all flowed through the port of Zeila.
Making Zeila the pivot point in what was essentially a proxy war.
Absolutely. A proxy war between the Ottoman and Portuguese empires fought out in the Horn of Africa. And this Ottoman-backed Adal offensive was so successful, so devastating, that the Abyssinian emperor desperately appealed to Europe for help.
Which led to the Portuguese intervention.
Right. A full Portuguese expeditionary force arrived, led by Cristóvão da Gama, Vasco da Gama's son. Zeila was ground zero for this clash of global powers.
Before we get to the decline, let's just pause on that golden age, roughly 14th to 16th centuries. What was life like in Zeila then? What kind of city was it?
Oh, it was genuinely cosmopolitan, a real melting pot. You had Somali clans, particularly the Dir, Afar people, Harare, merchants from the highlands, Arabs, Persians, all living and trading side by side.
A bustling international port.
Definitely. The economy was complex. Exports were huge: gold, ivory, myrrh, frankincense, camels, slaves. But the imports tell the story too. Fine textiles, iron, dates.
And you mentioned something surprising earlier,
Yes, the Chinese Celadon porcelain.
right? Finding fragments of that in the ruins today, it just drives home the global reach, doesn't it? Luxury goods from Ming China ending up in this Horn of Africa port?
It really does. And it wasn't just goods flowing through. Zeila was an intellectual gateway to
A center of learning?
the major center for Islamic scholarship. It produced respected jurists, theologians. Their reputation reached Cairo, Damascus. In fact, the honorific title al-Zaila'i, meaning from Zeila, became a common marker of scholarly prestige for people from that whole wider region.
Like saying someone was Oxbridge educated or something?
Sort of, yeah. It signified a certain quality of learning associated with the city.
But as you said, the tide turns, and the decline, it wasn't slow and gentle.
Not initially. It began with sudden, violent shocks. The first, and arguably the one that did the most lasting damage to its foundation, was that Portuguese sacking in July 1517.
This was before Imam Ahmad's main campaigns then?
Yes, significantly before. The Portuguese fleet under Lopo Soares de Albergaria didn't just raid the city. It was a deliberate act of economic destruction.
What did they do?
They torched and systematically destroyed it. They targeted the port facilities, the warehouses, the infrastructure. It was calculated to cripple Zeila as a commercial and political center. It really shattered the city's strength long before the later wars finished the job.
So that softened it up, basically. And then after the big wars between Adal and Abyssinia exhausted everyone.
Zeila was too weak to maintain its independence. It got absorbed by the expanding Ottoman Empire around 1559.
Right?
Then later, in the 19th century, it was administered for a time by Khedive's Mail of Egypt.
And finally,
Finally, in 1888, it became just another outpost in British Somaliland. Think about that trajectory. From an independent imperial capital, the heart of a sultanate, to just a provincial town managed by Europeans.
a huge fall from grace, but the final blows, the ones that really sealed its fate in the modern era, weren't about war or politics, were they? They were more practical.
Yeah, technology and geography caught up with it. You could say Zeila always had a couple of inherent disadvantages that became critical with modern shipping. Firstly, the bay is shallow and full of coral reefs. Big modern steamships with deep drafts couldn't get close. They had to anchor about a mile offshore.
Meaning everything had to be loaded and unloaded onto smaller boats. Very inefficient.
Very inefficient and costly. Secondly, and this was always an issue but became worse, was a critical lack of fresh water. Not ideal for steamships needing water or for supporting a large port workforce.
Okay, so geography was working against it now, but the ultimate killer blow was technological.
Absolutely. The single development that rendered Zeila almost irrelevant overnight was the Djibouti-Addis Ababa Railway.
Built by the French.
Built by the French. Completed between 1897 and 1917, this railway did what centuries of conflict couldn't. It completely bypassed Zeila.
How so?
It created a direct, efficient, modern link between the Ethiopian interior, the source of all that trade, and the brand-new deep-water port the French built at Djibouti.
Which had none of Zeila's disadvantages.
Exactly. Djibouti had a superb natural deep-water harbor, perfect for modern ships and the infrastructure to support them. The railway just made the old Dila-Harar camel caravan route, well, obsolete.
Economically stranded.
Completely, the gates that geography had opened were effectively slammed shut by technology.
Yet even with all that decline and neglect, the physical traces are still there, aren't they? You can still see things.
You can. The ruins are fragile, threatened by conflict. Even the 2005 tsunami did damage. But you can still find the old walled city. See those remaining mihrabs in the Masjid al-Kiblatain.
Those fragments of Chinese porcelain you mentioned.
Still there in the debris in the ruins out on Saad ad-Din Island, named after the martyred Sultan of Ifat, who died fighting Abyssinia. Recent Spanish archaeological work has confirmed just how extensive that medieval trading network anchored by Zeila really was. The evidence is literally in the ground.
So, Wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway from Zayla's story? It feels like a powerful lesson.
It really is. It's a stark reminder of how profoundly geography, faith, technology, and these big geopolitical power struggles shape a city's fate. Zayla's location created it, made it rich and powerful,
And also attracted the conflict that wore it down.
until technology delivered the final blow, making its geographical advantages irrelevant for a time.
Its legacy is incredibly complex then, a city defined by its strategic position, bringing prosperity but also endless conflict, until its gateway function was just bypassed.
Rendered irrelevant by railways and steamships.
But here's a final thought. The city is quiet now, yes, but that location, it's still right near the Bab el Mandeb Strait.
One of the busiest, most critical, crippling lanes in the entire world today.
Exactly. So the story might not be completely over. We're actually hearing discussions now, real talk, about potentially rebuilding the port of Zayla, maybe revitalizing that ancient trade corridor in some modern form.
It shows how history can be cyclical, doesn't it? The geography hasn't changed.
Right? So, the provocative question we leave you with is this. Could Zayla, the city of gateways that was effectively closed for over a century by technology and conflict, could the demands of 21st century global trade actually pry those gates open again? Is Zayla poised for a comeback?
It's certainly something to think about. The potential is still there, written on the